לכלותנו, עמד עלינו לכלותנו.
We are not afraid, although we know there's much to fear. We were moving mountains long before we knew we could. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. Who knows what miracles you can achieve when you believe. Somehow you will.
Who knows what miracles you can achieve when you believe? That was Keep Alive singing from Israel. I'm so sorry that we're half an hour late getting started, having bizarre Wi-Fi problems, parts of the house working, parts not. Okay, so we have Wi-Fi problems, but it seems that we're online. I think we're online, so thank God we're learning together. Let's light up the darkness. Okay. Who's with us on a beautiful Monday night? Yehudit in Florence, South Carolina, Pauline in Arkansas, Samantha in Tacoma, Stephen in Dover, New Hampshire, Tom says shalom, Paula in Chicago, Gail in Virginia. Janice says yay, and I agree. John in Sedona, Renee in Indy, commenting brr. Allison in North Carolina, Chaim in Charlotte, Judy says shalom, Jill in Illinois, Paula in Oregon, Chaim says Charlotte's in the house. Some French going back and forth. I'm not going to get into, my French is so bad. James says shalom, Moses, this better be good. Wow, okay, there's a challenge. Judy says woot. Michael with us from Queens, Ann in Merced, Mitch in Atlanta. Are we live in YouTube? Yes, we are. Lynn in Texas, Gigi in British Columbia, and somebody named TJF42193 says shalom from Michigan. So shalom to you. All right, we do seem to be streaming. I think Nina's offline, so I'll try to monitor comments today. But let me share this to the forum so that they get notified. Okay, here we go. All right, we're doing the best that we can. Gavi in Northern California. Michael says there's a foot of snow around him. Nancy in Southern Pines. Wow. And Carolyn says, yeah, shalom from Raleigh. All right, let's get to it. We got the wisdom candle going. My camera says it's going. People are commenting, so I think we're online. I apologize for these technical difficulties. We recently redid the Wi-Fi in our house so we wouldn't have problems, but okay, so we'll get this worked out. Where are we holding? This is going to be Daf Ayin Base, page 72 in Tractate Pesachim, the fourth volume of the Talmud, the laws of Passover. We're actually going to be starting near the bottom of page 71 on the B side with a new Mishna. This is the third Mishna in chapter 6 of Tractate Pesachim, and we're going to be talking about errors. And there's actually it's challenging Mishnah. It's not going to be so easy. We're going to work our way through it together. We're going to be doing the whole Mishnah, which is a long Mishnah, and then the beginning of the commentary, the first few paragraphs of commentary on this Mishnah. So the subject here is what happens when we make a mistake, right? So we meant to bring one offering, we bring another. But we're gonna get really into the nitty-gritty of it because the basic issue that is going to be operative here is what kind of mistake did we make? You know, how understandable is it that we made such a mistake? In making the mistake, did the result nevertheless produce some good, if not the intended good? Or did the result produce something that wasn't really useful at all, in which case the mistake was a worse mistake? Also, is it the kind of mistake that it's excusable because anybody could make that mistake? Or is it the kind of mistake where we wouldn't have made the mistake if we were a little bit more attentive to what we were doing? That's the kinds of issues that are at stake here. And that's why the title of today's show is an unwitting versus an unavoidable mistake. Those aren't just adjectives from English. They're actually kind of defined terms here in the Mishna and its commentary, as we'll see. So let's get into it and see if we can work our way through this together. All right, the third Mishnah here in chapter 6 of Tractate Pesachim. A korban Pesach, a paschal lamb, that one slaughtered for a different purpose on Shabbos, not knowing that it is prohibited for him to do so, is disqualified, and he is liable to bring a sin offering for it because he unwittingly performed prohibited labor on Shabbos, right? So the basics here, if you've been with us every day, you know what's going on, but just to be really clear for somebody maybe who's joining us the first time. So the paschal lamb, the korban Pesach, that's the Passover offering that we could only bring when the temple was standing in Jerusalem. It hasn't stood in 2,000 years. So when Passover is starting, that night, Passover begins at night, all Hebrew days, every date on the calendar in the Hebrew calendar begins the night before, as it were. So when Passover is starting on a Saturday night, we're obligated to slaughter the paschal lamb in the afternoon before Passover starts. If Passover is starting on a Saturday night, then we would be obligated to slaughter the Passover offering, which is a 1-year-old or less male lamb or young goat. So we would slaughter it on Saturday afternoon. Slaughtering is prohibited on Shabbos, but because we're commanded to slaughter the paschal offering at its appointed time, we would slaughter it even though it's Shabbos, because that's the afternoon before Passover begins. And in the particular year we're talking about, Passover fell out on a Saturday night, right? So what's going on here, though, in our Mishnah, so you set aside this lamb, right? And as we saw with a Passover lamb, a group of people have to have already agreed in advance that that is their Passover lamb, right? So it doesn't matter who bought it, but this group has all agreed that they are going to be the ones registered to that particular lamb, so that when it's slaughtered on the afternoon before Passover, and then it's slaughtered in the temple courtyard, and a little bit of its blood is sprinkled on the altar, and then it's roasted whole, and it's going to be that group of people who is going to be eating it together that night on Passover. We don't eat the Passover lamb since the temple is destroyed, but this is all laws that, when the temple is standing in Jerusalem. Okay, so all this group of people, they were registered on a Passover lamb, and then that lamb got confused. The person who is slaughtering it got confused. Right? So as we learned yesterday, there's this other offering called the Chagiga of Erev Pesach. So that's an additional offering that when you have a lot of people registered to a small lamb, which is the Passover lamb, so everybody's going to get such little amounts of meat, so then you could bring an additional offering, although it wouldn't apply on Shabbos. So that's one example of a lamb that the person might have got confused and took his Passover offering, his Passover lamb, and slaughtered it to be a different lamb. He could also have slaughtered it to be the daily offering of Shabbos, or he might have slaughtered it to be a peace offering, or he might have slaughtered it because he got really confused to be the Chagiga of the festival, which is an additional offering that's brought for the festival pilgrims, but you have to only slaughter it on Passover, right? Once the 15th of Nisan has come in, if you slaughter on the 14th, as we learned, it doesn't count as the festival offering. So there's a number of different mistakes that you could make, but the bottom line here is he took a Passover lamb, a lamb set aside to be the Passover lamb, and then instead of slaughtering it as the Passover lamb, he made a mistake and slaughtered it as some other kind of offering. And he did that on Shabbos. Right? So now what we've learned is the Passover lamb, its slaughter overrides the prohibition of slaughtering on Shabbos. Other offerings don't, with a few exceptions, right? There is the daily offering offered every day, even on Shabbos. There's the Shabbat offering. You slaughter that even on Shabbos. There's some sin offerings which are slaughtered even though they can't be eaten. Okay. But for the most part, other kinds of offerings, you can't slaughter them on Shabbos. So if you do, then you did an unnecessary slaughter on Shabbos. Now, you thought you were slaughtering the Passover lamb, so you didn't do it intentionally, but this would be considered an unwitting violation of Shabbos, not unavoidable, unwitting. It was an unintentional violation, a desecration of Shabbos because you did something you weren't supposed to do on Shabbos. In that situation, you become liable to bring a sin offering, right? The sin offering that you're liable to bring is to make an atonement because you desecrated Shabbos by doing an unnecessary slaughter on Shabbos, okay? So that's the first clause of our Mishnah. As for all other offerings, such as a peace offering, that one unwittingly slaughtered on Shabbos for the purpose of a Paschal offering. Now you have an animal that you set aside to be, let's say, some kind of a peace offering, and then you got it confused, and you brought it as a Passover offering. Passover offerings do override Shabbos, but you can't sacrifice this particular animal as a Passover offering because you already consecrated it as a different kind of offering. So says the Mishnah, as for all other offerings, such as a peace offering, that one unwittingly slaughtered on Shabbos, thinking it was for the purpose of a Paschal offering, the Passover offering, if this animal was not fit to be a Passover offering, for example, it was a female lamb, or it was more than 1 year old, or it wasn't a lamb or a goat at all, it was a calf, right? It was some kind of animal that has, for some reason, is not qualified, is not fit to be a Passover offering. And says that in the Koran Talmud here, for example, if they were female or they were cattle or they're more than 1 year old and they were clearly ineligible to be the Passover offering, then this person is liable to bring a sin offering. Because he did not fulfill the mitzvah to bring a Passover offering, his act of slaughter was unnecessary and therefore doesn't override Shabbos. And if the animal that he happened to slaughter, which was originally intended to be some other kind of offering, perhaps a shalamim, a peace offering, and he mistook it as his Passover offering and he slaughtered it as a Passover offering, if this mistaken animal that should have been for some other offering that he slaughtered as the Passover offering, if it's fit to be the Passover offering, right? He got it wrong, but the animal that he slaughtered happened to be a male lamb or goat less than 1 year old, unblemished, etc. So if it was fit, then we have a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer, who nevertheless deems him liable to bring the sin offering because of his unwitting transgression, because he can't bring this other offering as a Passover offering, so he still made a mistake. He shouldn't have done that. But Rabbi Yehoshua exempts him, right? This would still be prohibited to do, but he would be exempt from bringing a sin offering. Why? Because, according to Rabbi Yehoshua, this person intended to perform a mitzvah, and despite his error, he did in fact perform a mitzvah. So he is not liable to bring a sin offering. And in this case, he performed a mitzvah because offerings that are sacrificed for a different purpose are still fit. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua disagree on this, right? If you made a mistake, you took some other offering, you brought it as a Passover offering, it turns out that the kind of animal you chose to bring as a Passover offering is in fact qualified to be a Passover offering. So Rabbi Eliezer, since you consecrated for something different, he would hold you liable to bring the sin offering. Rabbi Yehoshua would excuse. Rabbi Eliezer said to Rabbi Yehoshua, if, with regard to the Paschal lamb, which is permitted to be slaughtered on Shabbos for its own purpose, right? You meant to bring a Passover lamb, you brought a Passover lamb, you slaughtered it on Shabbos, that's permitted. When one changed its purpose, he is nevertheless liable, right? So that was the first clause where you took a Passover lamb that was meant to be the Passover lamb, but then you slaughtered it as some different kind of offering. All agree that you're liable to bring the sin offering. So Rabbi Eliezer is making this point. So if with regard to the Paschal lamb, which you can slaughter on Shabbos, it is permitted when you do it for its own purpose, then you made a mistake and slaughtered it for as some other kind of offering, right, for a different purpose. Nevertheless, you are liable to bring the sin offering. Then, with regard to other offerings which are prohibited to slaughter on Shabbos, even for their own purpose, when one changed their purpose, is it not right that he should be liable? Right? He's trying to make this Kal V'chomer argument right? So if we can follow what Rabbi Eliezer just said, right? We all agree that if you took a Passover lamb, which you could slaughter for its own purpose on Shabbos afternoon, but then you made a mistake and brought it as some other kind of offering, and then you become liable to bring a sin offering, then how much more if you started with the wrong kind of offering, which you're not allowed to slaughter on Shabbos, and then you also made a mistake with it? Of course you should be liable to bring a sin offering. Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, no, this reasoning is faulty. If you say that one is liable to bring a sin offering if he slaughtered a Paschal lamb for a different purpose, it is because he changed its purpose for something forbidden. He started with a Paschal lamb that he was allowed to slaughter on Shabbos. Then he changed it with his mistake into some kind of an offering that is not allowed to bring on Shabbos. And according to Rabbi Yehoshua, that's why he's not going to be penalized and he's liable to bring a sin offering. But can you say the same thing about offerings that he slaughtered for the purpose of a Paschal offering? Right now, if you took some other kind of offering that's prohibited to slaughter on Shabbos, but in your error, you thought you were bringing a Paschal lamb, which is permitted to slaughter on Shabbos, that's a totally different situation, right? Because if you brought the wrong kind of offering, you should have realized that the kind of offering you were bringing, according to your mistake, is still prohibited on Shabbos. But if the mistake you made was that you took this, peace offering and you thought it was the Passover offering, which is permitted to slaughter on Shabbos, then the mistake, at least according to Rabbi Yehoshua, is a much more understandable and innocent sort of mistake. Rabbi Eliezer said to Rabbi Yehoshua, let the communal offerings, right, like the daily offering that's brought every day in the temple, such as the daily offering and the additional offerings of Shabbos and festivals, the musaf, right, the additional offerings that are brought on Saturdays and on festivals in the temple, prove the matter. For they are permitted to be slaughtered on Shabbos for their own purpose. They are permitted to be slaughtered on Shabbos. And nevertheless, one who unnecessarily slaughters a different offering for their purpose. So if you bring some other kind of offering and you think you're bringing a daily offering, like the daily offering that's due to go on Shabbos anyway, and you make this mistake of some other offering and you think you're offering it as the daily offering, but it was a mistake, you didn't offer the right thing, you're going to be liable to bring the sin offering. So this would tend to disprove Rabbi Yehoshua's contention, because the mistake that you made, you thought you were bringing an offering that's permitted to slaughter on Shabbos, right? This indicates that even when a particular offering may be slaughtered, one is nevertheless liable if he slaughtered a different offering for the purpose of the permitted offering, okay? Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, no, if you say this law with regard to communal offerings, it is because they have a limit. So the difference between communal offerings and the Passover offering is that there's only one communal offering being brought every day on behalf of the whole nation of Israel. And there's, two that are being brought as the musaf, the additional offerings. They're very limited in number. If you made such a mistake, you should know better than to know, if your job is to bring the daily offering on behalf of the whole Jewish people, and you got it wrong, okay, we're definitely going to hold you liable. But it's a much more understandable error if you're bringing it thinking that it's a Passover offering, because there's thousands of people in Jerusalem when the temple is standing and it's the afternoon before Passover begins. And it's readily understandable that somebody may make a mistake and think that one of his two offerings, one of which is the Passover offering and the other is an additional offering, that this might be the Passover, that he confuses them and he slaughters the wrong one as the Passover offering. Much more understandable, says Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Meir says, according to Rabbi Yehoshua, even one who unwittingly slaughters other offerings for the purpose of communal offerings beyond their daily limit is exempt for the same reason, i.e. that he intended to fulfill a mitzvah that is permitted on Shabbos. The mistake that he made, right, if he had been correct, he would have been performing a mitzvah. So Meir, even in the case of communal offerings, which you really should have known better because there's such a limited number of them, Rabbi Meir would still exempt him from being liable to bring a sin offering. The Mishnah continues with another halacha, another law with regard to the Passover offering. If one slaughtered a paschal lamb on Shabbos and mistakenly intended it for those who cannot eat it. Now, this part of the Mishnah we've seen before, right? So one slaughtered a paschal lamb. So Passover begins Saturday night. It's Saturday afternoon. He has a lamb set aside as the paschal lamb. He takes the correct lamb. It is permitted to slaughter it on Shabbos afternoon. But the problem here isn't that he took the wrong lamb. The problem is the following. He mistakenly intended it for those who cannot eat it, such as sick or elderly people who are unable to eat the meat. Right, so the group of people that was registered on this lamb, right, they have registered on this lamb, meaning they've all agreed that after that lamb is slaughtered in the temple and its blood is scattered on the altar and then it gets roasted, they're all going to eat a little piece of it to fulfill their obligation to eat the paschal lamb on Passover, right? So they're going to do that. But it turns out that they can't eat, right? They're sick or they're elderly and they just can't eat that meat. Then you have a problem because you slaughter it for people to eat, but they can't eat it. That's the issue that's being discussed here. So he mistakenly intended it for those who cannot eat it, such as sick or elderly people who are unable to eat the meat, or for those who did not register for it, right? It has to be a group of people who in advance agreed that that's going to be their lamb to be slaughtered and roasted and eaten Passover night. Or for the sake of the uncircumcised, or for those who are ritually impure, who are tameh. Those people in that state, a Jew who's uncircumcised, or a non-Jew for that matter, or somebody who's in a state of tumah, like he touched a corpse, or he touched a dead creeping thing, or he had some bodily emission that rendered him ritually impure. So they're not allowed to eat of the paschal lamb. So if one slaughtered it for them, who are not in a state where they're allowed to eat the Passover lamb, the offering is disqualified, and the one who slaughtered is liable to bring a sin offering for his unnecessary act of slaughter. Remember, he's not liable to bring a sin offering because he slaughtered a lamb for these people who can't eat it. He's liable to bring a sin offering because he slaughtered this lamb for people who can't eat it, and he slaughtered it on Shabbos, right, when it was prohibited to slaughter. So you override the Shabbos prohibition on slaughtering when you are correctly bringing a Passover lamb for people who are qualified to eat it, etc. That's the mistake he made. He slaughtered for people who can't eat it, so it was unnecessary slaughter, and therefore he did not have the right to override the Shabbos prohibition. If, however, he slaughtered it for those who can eat and those who cannot eat. In other words, there was a group of people registered, and the group included people who were unfit, that they were uncircumcised, or they were tameh, or they don't have the ability to eat, or etc. That there were members of the group who can't eat it, but as long as there are members of the group who can eat it, okay. So then he slaughtered a Passover lamb in its time. It happened to be Shabbos, but the slaughter in its appointed time overrides Shabbos as long as there are people who are qualified to eat it. And there are people who are qualified to eat it. And the fact that there's some people in the group who are not qualified to eat it, it's okay. It doesn't. He still fulfilled a mitzvah purpose when he slaughtered on Shabbos. So in that situation, he's exempt. Since a paschal lamb slaughtered with dual intentions of these types is valid, the act of slaughter was justified. If he slaughtered it and it was found to have a blemish, the offering is disqualified and he is liable to bring a sin offering for having unwittingly performed a prohibited labor on Shabbos, as he should have examined the animal before it was slaughtered. Right? If he examined the animal properly, he would have seen, oh, this has the type of blemish that renders it unfit to be a paschal lamb. If he had seen that, he would have known, oh, okay, this is unfit to be a paschal lamb, so I cannot slaughter it on Shabbos afternoon. The only reason he wasn't aware of the blemish is because he didn't inspect the animal carefully enough, so it sits well with us. It makes sense that he would then be liable to bring the sin offering. If he slaughtered it and it was found to have a hidden condition that would cause it to die within 12 months, this is called a treifa, right? So when that word treif, which in modern parlance usually just means not kosher, it's not kosher, but it's a specific meaning. A treifa is an animal that had some kind of an internal problem. Often it's like it had a thorn in its lungs, right? And so when you slaughter and then you open the animal up, and then you see that it had an internal defect that would have caused it to die within 12 months, so then that animal is essentially deemed like the walking dead, and it was not slaughtered properly because it's almost like a nevela, an animal that wasn't slaughtered in a kosher manner, and then Jews can't eat that animal, even though in other ways it's fine. And likewise a treifa. Jews cannot eat that animal and certainly can't be offered up on the altar. But you wouldn't know that when you bring the animal. You can't know that an animal was a treifa until you've slaughtered it, and then you sort of open it up, take out its entrails, etc., prepare it for roasting. Only then could you discover that it was a treifa. So this was literally an unavoidable mistake. There was no way for him to know. And so this is an unavoidable mistake as opposed to an unwitting mistake. Unwitting means if he had tried harder, he could have avoided the mistake. He didn't do it intentionally, but it was a little bit of negligence associated with it. The treifa, it doesn't matter how careful he was, he couldn't have discovered that it was a treifa until it was slaughtered. So in that situation, the animal is unfit. They still won't have a lamb to eat in that group, but the person who slaughtered is exempt from bringing a sin offering. If he slaughtered it, and afterward it became known that the owners had withdrawn from it and registered for a different paschal lamb. So this group of people got together. They said, okay, this is our lamb. We're all a group together. We're all registered for it. He says, good, I'm taking the lamb. I'm going into the temple courtyard. I'm going to slaughter it and have the priests scatter the blood. And after he left, the group somehow got confused who they had agreed with. Different people were making different deals. And then that group said, okay, we're not going to be on that lamb. We're going to be on this lamb. So then when he comes back, he finds out that unbeknownst to him, the group had dropped his lamb as their lamb. So he slaughtered it not for any people. That means that it was unnecessary slaughter on Shabbos. So the question arises, is he liable to bring the sin offering? So he slaughtered, and afterward it became known that the owners had withdrawn and registered for a different paschal lamb, in which case this one was slaughtered unnecessarily, as no one was registered for it, or it became known that the people who had registered for it died between the time they registered for it and when he slaughtered it, or that those people had become tameh, ritually impure. Someone died out there in the courtyard and they helped bury him. They did a beautiful deed, but then they touched a human corpse, so they're in a state of tuma, and they're not going to be fit to eat the paschal lamb. In all these cases, the one who slaughtered the lamb is exempt from bringing a sin offering because he slaughtered with permission. At the time that he went off to slaughter the lamb, all the correct conditions were there. He had the right lamb on the right day for the right people. And things changed after he left. He couldn't have known about it. That is an unavoidable error, not an unwitting error. So he is exempt. That is the Mishna. Okay. Now, the Gemara on this page is actually, it's a long page of Gemara. There's no way we're going to be able to cover all of it. So we're just going to begin the discussion of the sages about our Mishnah, and then I'll get to your questions. Okay, so the Gemara. When the Mishnah speaks of one who slaughtered a paschal lamb on Shabbos for a different purpose, with what precisely are we dealing, right? So he had a paschal lamb, and then he's going to make a mistake, and he's going to slaughter it to be some different kind of offering. So now the Gemara is going to say, well, let's be more specific. What was the mistake that he made? So if you say, we are dealing with one who erred, who made a mistake, in that he actually thought this was a different offering and not a paschal offering, learn from it, i.e. from the fact that the offering is disqualified and he is therefore liable to bring a sin offering, that the erroneous uprooting of the status of an offering constitutes uprooting, even though he had no intention to do so. It would, however, be surprising to find the Mishnah taking a stand on this issue, as we find elsewhere that this is the subject of a dispute between Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara. Rather, the Mishnah must certainly be referring to one who intentionally uprooted the animal's designation as a paschal lamb and offered it as a different offering. Right? So now the first question the Gemara is asking is, well, he had a paschal lamb, okay, and then he brought it as a different kind of offering. And therefore, he's going to end up being liable to bring a sin offering. So it must mean that even though he didn't intend to change its designation from a paschal lamb to some kind of different offering, he didn't intend to do that. He did it by mistake. Nevertheless, the designation of that animal is going to change, right? And that's why this results in him being liable to bring a sin offering. Erroneous uprooting of its designation constitutes uprooting of its designation. However, that seems to be a matter of dispute among other sages. It's not a given. The Mishnah seems to be taking it as a given, but since other sages are still disputing that, even the later period of the Gemara, which is a later commentary on the Mishnah, it must be that this is not so simple. It must be therefore it must be referring to one who intentionally, he knew that it was a paschal lamb. Knowing it was a paschal lamb, he said, you know what? I don't want to bring this as a paschal lamb. Instead, I'm going to change it and bring it as this other kind of offering. That's an intentional uprooting of it was consecrated as a paschal lamb. And now he's going to say, you know what? I know I consecrated as a paschal lamb. I'm going to change its consecration to a different kind of offering. And it would seem that that is what triggers him to be liable to bring a sin offering, because you can't do that and then override Shabbos by slaughtering this animal, right, whose designation was inappropriately changed. The Gemara continues, however, and says, if so, say the latter clause of the Mishnah, right, when it says that as for all other offerings that one unwittingly slaughtered on Shabbos for the purpose of a paschal offering, if they were not fit for the paschal offering, he is liable to bring a sin offering. And if they are fit, Rabbi Eliezer deems him liable to bring a sin offering, whereas Rabbi Yehoshua exempts him. Now, if the Mishnah is referring to one who intentionally uprooted the original designation of the animal, he knew it was a paschal lamb, and he changed it into a different offering, which he knew was not a paschal offering, what does it matter to me whether the animal was fit or unfit? He certainly does not think that he is performing a mitzvah. Why then does Rabbi Yehoshua exempt him from bringing a sin offering? Right, so hold on a second. With respect to this, the latter clause where he took some other kind of offering and he's bringing it as a Passover lamb, he thinks, right? He shouldn't. It was a mistake. He thought it was a Passover lamb, but it wasn't. This is definitely a mistake. So the Gemara is saying, well, what difference does it make whether it's fit or unfit? He certainly does not think that he's performing a mitzvah. Why? But he does think he's performing a mitzvah. Wait a second. As for that one unwittingly slaughtered Shabbos for the purpose of the paschal offering, well, if he thinks he's performing the paschal offering, he does think he's bringing a mitzvah. So I'm a little confused there. So hold on. Rather, it is obvious that we must be dealing with one who made a mistake. But if so, we have a contradiction in the Mishnah. The first clause is referring to one who intentionally uprooted the animal's designation. He knew it was a Passover lamb, and then he changed it to some other kind of offering. Whereas the latter clause is referring to one who erred about it. He didn't do it on purpose, right? He thought it was some other kind of offering. He thought he was bringing the Passover offering. And Rabbi Avin said, yes, we must accept this conclusion, even though it is unusual. The first clause deals with one who uprooted the animal's designation, whereas the latter clause deals with one who made a mistake, right? So the nature of the mistake is different in the first clause, where he went from thinking that it was a Paschal lamb, and then he changed it to something else. He did that on purpose. In the second clause, he thought he was dealing with, he started with a different kind of lamb, and he thought it was the Paschal lamb, and he just did that by mistake. The Gemara relates that Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef once found Rabbi Abahu standing among a multitude of people, and he said to him, "What is the meaning of this Mishnah?" Rabbi Abahu said to him, "The first clause is referring to one who intentionally uprooted the animal's status, whereas the latter clause is referring to one who made a mistake about it." Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef learned this statement from him 40 times. Over and over and over and over again, he made sure that that's what they were saying, and it seemed to him as though it were resting in his pouch. In other words, he repeated it many times until the Mishnah became crystal clear to him and etched in his memory. The Gemara raises a difficulty with this understanding of the Mishnah. We learn in the continuation of the Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer said to Rabbi Yehoshua, if, with regard to the Paschal lamb, which is permitted to be slaughtered on Shabbos as a Paschal lamb, when one changed its purpose, he is nevertheless liable. Then, with regard to other offerings that are forbidden to be slaughtered on Shabbos, even for their own purpose, when he changed their purpose to a Paschal lamb, is it not right that he should be liable? And if it is so that the two parts of the Mishnah are not talking about the same case, surely they are not similar and cannot be compared, as the first clause is referring to one who intentionally uprooted the animal's status, whereas the latter clause is referring to one who mistakenly changed it. The Gemara answers, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who put forward this Kal V'chomer argument, there is no difference, for in his opinion, someone who made a mistake while intending to perform a mitzvah is liable to bring a sin offering even if he made a reasonable mistake. Thus, he does not differentiate between the deliberate uprooting of the animal's status and the mistaken sacrificing of the offering for a different purpose. But according to Rabbi Yehoshua, for whom there is a difference between the two cases, let him answer Rabbi Eliezer in this way, that the first clause of the Mishnah is referring to one who intentionally uprooted the status of an offering, while the latter clause is referring to one who made a mistake. And why does he introduce another factor, that in the first clause he changed the animal's purpose for something forbidden, whereas in the latter clause he changed it for something permitted? The Gemara explains that this is what Rabbi Yehoshua said to Rabbi Eliezer. According to me, the cases are not comparable because the first clause deals with one who intentionally uprooted the animal's designation, whereas the latter clause deals with one who made a mistake. That's enough, right? According to Rabbi Yehoshua, that would be enough to exempt the person. In case it was a mistake, in the first it was intentional. He says, however, even according to you, who do not differentiate in this manner, I can still answer as follows. No, if you say that one is liable if he slaughtered a Paschal lamb for a different purpose, it is because he changed its purpose to an offering that it is not permitted to sacrifice it, to slaughter it on Shabbos. But you can't say the same thing about offerings that would have been prohibited to slaughter on Shabbos, but in his error, he thought it was the Passover lamb, which is permitted to be slaughtered on Shabbos, right? So the mistake that he made, if he had been right about it, he would have been bringing an offering that's permitted to slaughter on Shabbos. Whereas the first error, right, where he took a Passover lamb and slaughtered it as something else, well, as a Passover lamb, it was permitted. But the mistake that he made, he thought it was this other kind of offering. And that other kind of offering is prohibited to slaughter on Shabbos, right? So it's sort of like a double mistake. And that's why in that situation, Yehoshua would agree with Eliezer that person is liable to bring a sin offering. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. After that late start and a lot of technical difficulties, we seem to be together. I don't even know if Nina's going to be able to pass me questions. Let's see if she was able to get back online. Apparently, yes. Okay. So Michael Diamond says, when you say you did an unnecessary slaughter, who are you talking about? The actual person that killed the animal, the Kohen that sprinkled the blood, or the owner of the offering? Here we're talking about the one who shechts, right? The one who slaughters the animal. And even though very often the animals that were slaughtered in the temple courtyard were slaughtered by Kohanim, by the priests, that's the one part of bringing an offering which was not necessary to do by the priest, right? The rites that the priest had to do was to receive the blood and walk it over to the altar and sprinkle it on the altar. And then if it was the type of offering where some of the meat needed to be eaten by a priest, obviously only the priest could do that. So even though it was usually the priests who would do the shechting, here what we're saying, we're talking about the person who shechts, who slaughters, and that person does not necessarily have to be a priest. So what's prohibited to do on Shabbos is to slaughter, period. We override that prohibition only for the Passover lamb at its appointed time, or for the daily offering that's brought every day, including Shabbos, or for the additional offerings of Shabbos, and that's it. Right? So, but if you are bringing the wrong kind of offering, or an animal that's unfit, or for people that can't eat it, etc., so then it was an unnecessary slaughtering, and you did it on Shabbos, that's why you become liable to bring the sin offering. Tom, great question. But wouldn't he still be slaughtering it for himself, right? If he slaughtered it for people who are unfit to eat it, and as we saw, if there's a mix where he slaughters for some who can eat it and some who cannot, then he's okay, right? Because he did at least slaughter for people who can eat it. So if he's one of the people who is fit to eat it, so it would seem that he's okay because at least he's fit to eat it. And I think that's a great objection to bring up. I think that should work, but I guess it's also possible that he could turn out that he's not fit. Or what I'm not sure is, can he slaughter if he is unfit to eat, but he's doing it for people that are fit to eat? I think he can't if he's tameh, because he couldn't have even walked into the temple. But if, for example, he's old or he's sick and he can't eat, but he's planning to slaughter for people who can eat, that would be okay. But then if it turned out that, no, the whole group can't eat, that's when the problem kicks in. Sharon, what becomes of the unnecessarily slaughter? Is it burned, or can it be permitted to the unobligated but hungry people? There's definitely different answers to that, I think, depending on why it was brought. I think probably when it was really, when it was, the problem is it's consecrated, right? So it was consecrated. It's not going to be allowed to be, people can't use something that's consecrated just to benefit themselves. If it was consecrated for them to eat as the Paschal offering, and then it turns out it's not a Paschal offering, it's unfit as a Paschal offering, I'm sure there's many different cases and there's going to be some different outcomes, but I suspect that more often than not, they're going to have to burn it. It's going to be unfit for anybody since it was brought for the wrong purpose. But for sure, there's some exceptions to that. I just can't, name the list off the top of my head. Tom, were there extra lambs for people too poor to bring one? My sense of that is, I don't have an answer for you for sure. I don't have a definitive answer for you. But if we picture the scene, right, all you have to do is be part of a group, and as a part of that group, and you're fit to do, you're not in a state of ritual impurity, you're able to eat, you're circumcised, etc. You just need to be part of a group, and that group has to agree to give you like a tiny little morsel of the lamb. But really all that matters is that you're part of that group in advance. So my guess is, it's just a guess, but I'm imagining thinking about Uman, right? So Uman in the Ukraine, when there's no COVID in the world, so 80,000 people descend on this little town in the Ukraine to celebrate Rosh Hashanah together. And they're really Jews from all over the world and all over the spectrum of Jewry. And there's a lot of people who get there, and it's like they spent every dollar they had just to get there, and they don't have a place to sleep, and they don't have a place to eat. And they're just relying on the kindness of strangers when they get there. And you know what? They find a place to sleep, and they find food to eat. Thanks in large part, in terms of eating, to Reb Lazer Shiner, an incredible philanthropist who saw how many poor people there were in Uman. This really got going again after the Soviet Union, the Iron Curtain fell in 1989. I think like the next year they had 30 or 60 people, and then the next year 100, and then a few hundred, and it's grown every year, and now it's it's approaching 100,000 people descend on this little town. And people like Reb Shiner, who are very wealthy and believe that, by feeding other people, it's such a good that if they're in a position to do it, they'll do it. And they also credit that with bringing blessing into their own lives. So I just feel like, I can't guarantee this, but I feel like, the pilgrimage was a regular thing every year, 3 times a year. There were definitely going to be people who got there and were too poor when we're talking about Passover. And I just think that the poor person who otherwise wouldn't get any Passover lamb would be able, as long as he was there in time, to find some group and say, can I be part of your group? And that group would say, of course, come, be with us. And when we roast the lamb, we'll make sure you get some of it. I mean, it was a real time of Jewish unity. You experience that when you're in Uman, and I'm sure the Jews experienced it during the pilgrimage festivals, and particularly at Passover, when we recall that we were all emerging from slavery in Egypt. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that why did we merit to receive Torah? Because as we left Egypt, every Jew felt like a Jew. There's never been a time of every Jew being so aware and inhabiting his Jewish identity as when we left Egypt. And when we recall that, I think there's a spirit of generosity that goes along with it. So that's a long way of answering that. I think, Tom, that even people who are too poor to be part of a group, who are too poor in advance to bring their own lamb, would be taken into one of the many, many groups who had registered for their lamb at that time. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. I apologize for the late start. It was very odd. Wi-Fi problems. Recently, we had Facebook glitch problems. Please, God, help us to just get past electronic issues so that we can learn Torah together. Have a great night, my holy sisters and brothers, and with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. All the best.